Hey everyone, welcome to Life Reflections. Today I'm sharing a life story that might just hit home for you. If you enjoy it, give it a thumbs up, drop a comment with your thoughts, and hit that subscribe button to join me for more moments that matter. Let's dive in.
I saved my husband's family from losing their house, but what came next left me betrayed and wiser than ever. It's strange how life has a way of pulling you into situations you never saw coming. One moment, you're living what you think is your dream life, married to the person you love, surrounded by the people you care about, working hard to build something bigger than yourself. The next, everything shatters. And you're left standing in the ruins of your own choices, trying to piece together what's left of your trust and your heart. That's exactly how I felt the day everything changed. The day I realized that the man I had been building my life with wasn't the person I thought he was. The day I realized that all the love I had poured into him, into his family, and into our shared life had been nothing more than a strategic investment for someone else's gain. I used to think of myself as a strong woman, independent, successful, and someone who could weather any storm. But as I walked through that door, my hands trembling from what I had just overheard, I realized something that took me a long time to come to terms with. I had been living in a fairy tale. A fairy tale built on lies, deceit, and manipulation. And the worst part? I hadn't even seen it coming. It all started when I met Noah. He was different from anyone I'd ever dated before. Quiet, thoughtful, and grounded in a way that spoke to me on a deeper level. We had chemistry right from the start, and before I knew it, we were married, settling into a life I thought would be forever. Noah had this charm about him, a calm, steady presence that made me feel like everything was going to be okay. We were a perfect match, or so I thought. We had our little ups and downs like any couple, but nothing too major. We lived in a cozy home. I had my career in tech, something I had worked tirelessly to build, and he had his own consulting business. We were happy, or at least, I thought we were. But then came the phone call that would change everything. Noah's parents were in financial trouble. They were losing their house due to bad investments and mounting debts. The type of debts that could destroy a family. When he told me, I didn't hesitate for a second. After all, they were family, and family takes care of each other, right? So, I agreed to help. I knew it would mean a financial strain on us, but I was ready to do whatever it took to save them. I loved Noah. I loved his family. This was the right thing to do. But things didn't go as expected. At first, it was small things, requests for money here and there, to help with repairs and bills, just to keep the house afloat. I didn't mind. I had always been the kind of person who believed that family was worth the sacrifice. But soon, the money started piling up. One loan became two, and before I knew it, we were deep in the financial hole, one I was digging with my own hands. Noah assured me it was temporary. He promised he would pay me back, that things would get better. But the money never came. And as the bills continued to stack up, I began to feel like I was sinking in quicksand, pulling Noah and his family out of their mess, only to be stuck with the burden all by myself. It was exhausting. And to make matters worse, Noah's involvement in the financial aspect started to wane. He wasn't as hands-on as I had expected him to be. Instead, I found myself picking up the slack. As the months passed, I found myself making payment after payment from my own savings, just to keep things from falling apart. It wasn't just about the money anymore, it was about my trust. The promises Noah had made to me began to feel hollow. I wanted to believe him, but the reality was too glaring to ignore. He wasn't paying me back. In fact, he wasn't doing much of anything except watching me carry the weight of it all. He'd make small gestures to show affection, bring me flowers, compliment me on my work, tell me I was doing a great job, but his words didn't match his actions. I started to notice things I had overlooked before: Noah's casual spending habits, the trips he took without consulting me, the purchases he made for himself while I was working overtime to cover our expenses. But it wasn't until I sat down with him one evening, trying to go over the finances once again, that I discovered the truth. Noah had been hiding something from me, something much bigger than just a few missed payments. His parents weren't just struggling with some debt, they were drowning in it. The total? Around $140,000. This wasn't just a bad investment in a coffee shop, this was a chain of decisions that had led to a financial disaster. And I had unknowingly been dragged into it all. When I confronted Noah about it, he seemed hesitant, his eyes shifting uncomfortably. I could feel the weight of his guilt in the air between us. He had hoped I wouldn't find out, that I wouldn't ask the hard questions. But I did. And the more he spoke, the more I realized that this wasn't just about money, it was about control. He had allowed me to take over, to become the financial backbone of the family while he quietly played the role of the supportive husband. But it was all an act. It was then that I realized the truth. I wasn't just married to Noah. I was married to a lie. A lie that he had been feeding me for months. His family had always painted me as the golden daughter-in-law, the one who would do anything to help. And I did, I gave everything I had. But what did I get in return? Nothing. Not even the respect I deserved. The final straw came one evening when I overheard a conversation between Noah and his parents. They thought I couldn't hear, but I did. And what I heard broke me. They spoke about how they had used me, how they were going to cut me loose once the debt was paid off. I was nothing more than a tool to them, a financial solution to their problems. They didn't care about me. They didn't care about Noah. They only cared about what they could get from me. That night, I made a decision. I would no longer be their pawn. I would take control, not just of my finances, but of my life. I would no longer allow myself to be manipulated. I would stop paying their debts. I would stop sacrificing my future for a family that didn't respect me. The next few months were a blur. I filed for divorce. I took the house into my name. I worked with my lawyer to gather all the evidence I needed to protect myself. And when the time came, I left. I didn't shout. I didn't scream. I walked away quietly, knowing that I had finally taken back control of my life. Noah was stunned. His family was stunned. But it was too late. I had already moved on. I had learned that sometimes the hardest thing to do is let go. And when you finally do, you realize that the only person you need to take care of is yourself. The divorce wasn't easy. But it was necessary. I walked away with my dignity, my peace of mind, and my financial freedom. It wasn't about revenge, it was about justice. I had learned the hard way that sometimes the people we love the most are the ones who hurt us the deepest. But in the end, it's our ability to rise above that pain and reclaim our lives that defines us. Now, looking back, I see that my story wasn't just about betrayal, it was about growth. I am stronger now than I've ever been. I am wiser, more independent, and more confident in my ability to make the right decisions for myself. I will never again allow myself to be someone else's safety net. I will always put myself first, because I know now that I am worthy of respect and love, not just from others, but from myself. So, when I look back at what happened, I don't regret a thing. The journey was painful, but it taught me lessons I couldn't have learned any other way. And most importantly, it taught me that the only person I need to save is me. At first, I couldn't put my finger on it. There was something that didn't sit right with me about Noah's plans for his family. When he first brought up the idea of us moving in with his parents and helping them renovate their house, I understood the situation, or at least, I thought I did. His family was in trouble, and as his wife, it felt natural to step in and help. But there was a creeping feeling that kept gnawing at me, like an itch I couldn't scratch, that something about the whole situation was off. It wasn't like Noah to be so focused on other people's problems. He'd always been the type of guy who kept his head down and his emotions in check. He was calm, steady, and always made decisions with a clear sense of purpose. So when he suggested we take on this huge financial burden, I wanted to trust him. I thought maybe I was overthinking it. After all, we were married, and marriage was about partnership, right? But as time went on, I started noticing small cracks in the facade, things I couldn't ignore anymore. The first sign came when Noah mentioned how his parents' financial troubles had grown worse. At first, he made it sound like they were struggling to make ends meet due to some bad investments, but he assured me everything would be fine once we helped them out with the renovation costs. He didn't go into much detail, but I figured it was just a typical family situation. Maybe they were behind on some bills or had taken out a loan they couldn't pay off. I didn't think it would amount to much more than a temporary inconvenience. But something didn't feel right. As the renovations began, I took on a bigger role than I had anticipated. It was supposed to be a shared project, a way to get involved with Noah's family and create something meaningful together. But I soon found myself shouldering most of the responsibility, choosing materials, dealing with contractors, and, most importantly, handling the finances. I remember sitting down with Noah one evening, reviewing the budget, and asking how we would split the costs between us and his parents. That's when he dropped the bombshell. "I was hoping you could front the money for now. My parents are having some financial trouble, and they can't afford to pay anything right now." My heart sank. I hadn't expected this. I knew they weren't doing well, but this was more than just a temporary setback. It felt like Noah was putting everything on my shoulders. And what bothered me even more was the fact that he wasn't offering any kind of clear plan to pay me back. "I'll take care of it when I can," he promised, but his words rang hollow in my ears. I didn't want to say no. I didn't want to let his parents down, but something about the way he said it made me uncomfortable. This wasn't the first time I had sacrificed for someone else. But this time felt different. I agreed to help out, because I loved Noah and I trusted him. I didn't realize at the time that trust was the one thing I would be giving up the most. Over the next few months, things started to get worse. The payments were piling up, and Noah seemed increasingly detached from the situation. He wasn't involved in the decision-making process as much as I had hoped. It was like the whole financial burden was mine to carry, while Noah just floated along, telling me everything would be okay. I remember one night, after I had just made another payment, I sat down with him and asked if he had any plans to contribute. I wasn't trying to guilt him or make him feel bad, I was just trying to understand how we were going to get through this together. That's when he said, "I know you're doing a lot, Emma. And I really appreciate it. But the thing is, my parents' debt is huge. It's not just this renovation, it's everything they've been hiding from us." I froze. "What do you mean, hiding from us?" I asked, my voice trembling. Noah seemed hesitant, like he wasn't sure how much to say. But then, with a sigh, he admitted, "They're in debt. A lot of debt. Over $140,000. The words hit me like a slap in the face. $140,000? I repeated, unable to process what he was saying. "Yeah," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "My dad invested in a coffee shop chain, and it failed. He kept borrowing money to cover the first loan, and now, well, they can't keep up. I was hoping you could help. You're the only one who can save them right now." I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. $140,000. That wasn't a small amount. I had no idea that the debt had gotten this bad. It wasn't just some bad investment, it was a financial disaster, and now I was expected to fix it. I couldn't breathe for a moment. My thoughts were racing as I tried to process what was happening. I had already sunk tens of thousands of dollars into the renovation, but this was beyond anything I had ever imagined. I wanted to walk away. I wanted to scream. But I couldn't. Noah was my husband. His parents were in trouble. What was I supposed to do? I agreed to help, again, but I knew something had shifted. This wasn't just about saving a house, it was about something much darker. Noah had asked me to carry this burden alone, and the more I thought about it, the more I realized that I was being played. And that's when the doubts started to grow. I began to question everything Noah had said to me. Why hadn't he been more open about his family's financial situation from the start? Why had he waited until the renovation was almost finished to tell me the full story? What else was he hiding? As I continued to pay for the house renovations and his family's debts, I started noticing little things that made me suspicious. Noah was buying new gadgets, expensive gadgets, while I was footing the bill for the renovation and covering his parents' debts. He didn't seem to be making any real effort to pay me back. When I asked him about it, he'd make excuses: "I'm waiting for a paycheck," or "I'm working on a big project that'll pay off soon." But nothing ever changed. I knew something wasn't right. But every time I confronted him, he'd brush it off, telling me I was being paranoid. That made me feel like I was overreacting. I didn't want to be the nagging wife, so I held back. But the more I held back, the more the doubts began to eat at me. Then, one night, I overheard a conversation that shattered everything. I had come home early from work because a meeting had been cancelled. As I walked down the hallway toward the living room, I heard laughter coming from inside. It was Noah and his parents. I stopped in my tracks when I heard them talking. Noah's father, Carl, was the first to speak. "That girl really is a goldmine," he said. "Noah's lucky to have her. She makes money like water. All we have to do is keep her happy, and we're set." Noah chuckled. "Yeah, but once the house is done, maybe I should cut her loose. Sooner or later, she's going to start asking questions. And when she does, it'll be too late." The words hit me like a ton of bricks. It was all a plan. The renovation, the debt, it was all part of a strategy to use me. To use me until they got what they wanted and then cast me aside like I was nothing. I stood there, frozen, my heart pounding in my chest. They thought I couldn't hear them. They thought they had me fooled. But I wasn't going to play along anymore. I didn't confront them that night. I didn't scream. I didn't shout. I just turned around and walked out, as if nothing had happened. I needed to think. I needed to process what I had just learned. As the days passed, I couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal. Everything Noah had said to me, the promises, the sweet words, had been a lie. He had used me, manipulated me, and made me believe that I was doing the right thing. But now, I knew better. I wasn't just helping his family out of kindness. I was part of a scheme to drain me dry. That night, I made a decision. I would not let this go on any longer. I would take control of my life, my finances, and my future. And I would do whatever it took to protect myself from the people who had betrayed me. The sound of their voices hit me first. At first, I thought I was hearing things. It was a typical Wednesday evening. I had just wrapped up an exhausting day at work, back-to-back meetings, calls, and deadlines, and was looking forward to some peace. I didn't expect to come home to a scene that would tear apart everything I thought I knew about my husband and his family. Noah's parents were over, as usual. They often stopped by to check on the progress of the renovations or to chat about random things. But tonight was different. I had come home early from work because a meeting had been cancelled, giving me the chance to surprise Noah and maybe even cook him his favorite meal. I was feeling hopeful, maybe even excited to wind down with him. But as I walked through the front door, I noticed something odd. The door to the living room was slightly ajar, and I could hear laughter. It was Noah's voice, followed by his dad's booming laugh. My first instinct was to step back and quietly slip out of the room. But curiosity tugged at me. I didn't mean to eavesdrop, but I couldn't help it. I was standing just out of sight in the hallway, and I could hear every word they said. Noah's parents were in the living room, having what seemed like a relaxed conversation. But the more I listened, the more uneasy I felt. Carl, Noah's dad, was the first to speak. "That girl really is a goldmine," he said. His tone was light, almost casual, but there was a certain edge to it that made my stomach tighten. I stood frozen, my breath caught in my chest, as I realized he was talking about me. Noah laughed along, his voice a little too carefree. Yeah, she's perfect. Makes money like it's nothing, and she's always so eager to help out. We'll be set once the house is done. I frowned, trying to make sense of what they were saying. Were they talking about me like I was some sort of financial resource? But what came next made the blood run cold in my veins. Carl continued, Noah, she's the perfect one for this. She'll keep paying off the debts for us, doesn't even question it. All we have to do is make her think it's for the family's good. She's easy. The word easy hit me harder than anything else. My heart dropped into my stomach as I stood there, listening to them discuss me like I wasn't even in the room. As if I were just some tool they were using to get what they wanted. And it didn't stop there. The real gut punch came when Noah, with a hint of sarcasm in his voice, added, yeah, but once everything is paid off and the house is renovated, maybe it's time to cut her loose. Sooner or later, she's going to start asking questions. And when she does, we'll be done with her. She won't even know what hit her. I couldn't breathe. I wanted to scream. My legs felt like jelly. I leaned against the hallway wall for support, barely holding myself up. Cut her loose? I whispered to myself. It was like a slap in the face. I had been pouring my heart, my time, and my money into this marriage, this family, and this project. And for what? To be discarded like a piece of trash once they had taken everything they could from me? I stood there in complete silence, processing their words, trying to keep my composure. But every part of me was shaking. I wanted to barge in and confront them. I wanted to yell at Noah, demand an explanation. How could he say something like that about me? How could he not care at all about how I felt? But I didn't. I stayed silent. Because I knew. I knew that whatever I had thought our marriage was, whatever I had believed we were building together, it was a lie. Noah and his dad continued talking, completely unaware that I was standing there, listening to every word. I had to force myself to stay calm. I couldn't let them see how much their words had hurt me. I couldn't let them know that the very foundation of everything I believed in was crumbling. But inside, I was shattered. Noah's mom, Diane, chimed in, her voice sweet but carrying an undercurrent of something darker. Oh, Noah, she's perfect. She doesn't even seem to mind that we're relying on her. She just wants to help. And we've got it all figured out. Once the debt is cleared, we can just keep her around for a while longer until the house is completely finished. After that, we can slowly phase her out. It won't be hard. She won't be able to resist our charm. I couldn't take it anymore. The words phase her out echoed in my mind, repeating over and over. It was like a sick joke. I had spent months, no, years, working my ass off for them, supporting Noah, making sacrifices, and trying to build a future with him. And now I realized it was all part of some grand scheme they had been executing from the start. They had never cared about me. I had just been the perfect pawn in their game. They talked more, but it became a blur. My thoughts were racing, my head spinning. I had been so blind. I had trusted Noah with everything. And he, along with his family, had been playing me the whole time. I wasn't the loving wife they pretended I was. I was just a tool to them, a means to an end. But there was a strange calmness that washed over me as I stood there. I felt betrayed, yes. But I also felt something else, something stronger. A spark of realization. This was it. This was the moment when everything changed. I had been living in the dark for so long, but now the truth was right in front of me. I wasn't going to let them get away with this. I didn't know what to do next. Part of me wanted to storm in there and confront them all. I wanted to tear Noah apart, expose him for the manipulative, deceitful person he truly was. But another part of me knew that reacting with anger wouldn't solve anything. They had already shown me who they were, and now it was time for me to show them who I was. I slowly stepped back, making sure they didn't hear me, and retreated to my room. My heart was racing, but there was a newfound clarity in my mind. I knew what I had to do. I wasn't going to play their game anymore. I wasn't going to be their cash cow or their pawn. I was done. That night, I didn't say anything to Noah. I didn't confront him. I didn't let him know that I knew the truth. Instead, I spent the evening alone, processing everything I had heard, letting the full weight of it sink in. It was like a fog had lifted. I had been living in a fantasy, believing that our marriage was based on love and trust. But now I knew better. It was all about control. And I wasn't going to let them control me anymore. The next morning, I woke up with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in a long time. I wasn't going to let this betrayal define me. I wasn't going to let Noah and his family dictate my future. I had worked too hard, built too much, to let them destroy me. And that's when I made the decision. I wasn't going to confront them right away. I wasn't going to yell or scream. I was going to take action. I was going to do what they least expected. I was going to take back control of my life, my finances, and my future. I wasn't going to play by their rules anymore. From that moment on, I started planning. I knew I couldn't trust Noah. I knew I couldn't trust his family. But I could trust myself. I could trust my instincts. And I was going to use everything they had taught me to turn the tables in my favor. The unexpected twist wasn't just hearing the truth. It was realizing how much power I had in the situation. I had been their puppet, but no longer. I wasn't going to wait around for Noah to cut me loose. I was going to cut them out of my life, one by one, and take back what was rightfully mine. The realization came slowly at first, like a dull ache in the pit of my stomach that I tried to ignore. But it grew, deepening day by day until I couldn't escape it anymore. I was trapped in a life I had built on trust, love, and sacrifice, only to find out it had all been an illusion. The weight of being used, of having my time, energy, and finances exploited for someone else's gain, hit me harder than I ever expected. It was a betrayal so subtle, so insidious, that it took me too long to see it. And by the time I did, I had already given so much, more than I could ever get back. At first, everything seemed perfect. I had met Noah at the right time in my life. I was a successful woman, working my way up in a demanding career, yet I was still looking for something more, someone to share my life with. Someone who understood the pressures, the sacrifices, and the long nights spent chasing dreams. Noah seemed like the perfect person. He was thoughtful, kind, and seemed genuinely interested in me as a person. He wasn't intimidated by my success, like some of the men I had dated before. Instead, he admired it. I didn't realize then that his admiration was the first step in a much larger plan. A plan that, in time, would leave me questioning everything I believed about love, marriage, and family. I remember how easy it was to fall for him. He was always there for me, sending thoughtful messages, remembering the small details about my life, and making me feel like I was the most important person in the world. I felt seen and valued, and that was enough. We moved in together, and life started to feel like it was falling into place. But I never realized that beneath that perfect exterior, things were beginning to change. It started small. Noah's family had financial issues, and they needed help. At first, it seemed like a simple favor, nothing more than a way for me to support my new family. But as the months went on, I found myself sinking deeper and deeper into a pit of financial obligation. I was helping out, of course. It wasn't just about the money, it was about love, right? But the more I gave, the more Noah seemed to step back, as though he were watching me shoulder the weight of everything. His promises to pay me back never materialized, and I began to wonder if I was the only one who took our responsibilities seriously. I remember one night, sitting at the kitchen table, looking over the bank statements and feeling a tightness in my chest. The payments had become routine. Renovation costs, debts, loan repayments, it was never ending. And the most crushing part was that Noah, the man I had married, didn't seem to care. He wasn't stressed or worried. He wasn't shouldering the burden. It was always me. He would smile and tell me everything would be okay, that things would get better. But I was starting to feel the weight of it all. The promises started to feel like empty words, and the reality began to sink in. The emotional toll was subtle at first, like a shadow slowly creeping over me. I had always prided myself on being strong, independent, and capable. I had built my life from the ground up. I had learned how to fight for what I wanted and to never rely on anyone else. But now, here I was, dependent on Noah, on his promises, on his family. And the worst part was that I wasn't just relying on them, I was carrying them. I was financially and emotionally supporting not just my marriage, but the entire family's well-being. And yet, I was the one who felt like I was drowning. At first, I pushed those feelings aside. I didn't want to admit that something was wrong. I didn't want to see that the man I had trusted, the man I had given everything to, was not the partner I thought he was. But the cracks were there, slowly becoming bigger and more visible. It wasn't just the money. It was the way Noah would avoid talking about finances, the way he never took responsibility for the debts, the way he seemed content to let me handle everything. The turning point came when I overheard Noah's parents talking about me. I had no idea that my life was about to be flipped upside down. I had just come home early from work, looking forward to a quiet evening, only to find Noah's parents sitting in our living room. They didn't know I was standing in the hallway, listening to their conversation. I didn't mean to eavesdrop, but I couldn't help it. The things they were saying cut through me like a knife. They spoke about me as though I were a means to an end. They discussed how I was the perfect solution to their financial problems, how I had been easy to manipulate, and how once the debts were paid off, they would cut me loose. I stood frozen, my heart pounding, as I listened to them talk about me like I wasn't even a person, just a tool they could use and discard when they no longer needed me. In that moment, everything changed. The hurt, the anger, and the sense of betrayal flooded me. I had been giving everything I had to them, to Noah, thinking I was building a life based on love and partnership. But the truth was, I had been nothing more than a financial resource to them. I was just the person they could count on to fix their problems, to make everything better without ever once considering what I needed or wanted. The emotional roller coaster I had been on hit its peak in that moment. I felt so small, so foolish. But as the initial wave of pain and disbelief passed, something else started to grow inside me, something stronger, something that had been dormant for far too long. I had been used, yes. I had been manipulated and betrayed. But I wasn't going to let this define me. I wasn't going to let this break me. That night, I made a decision. I wasn't going to let Noah or his family control me anymore. I wasn't going to play their game. I wasn't going to stay in a marriage where I was nothing more than a means to an end. I wasn't going to keep paying their debts, doing their work, and supporting their lives while I was left with nothing. I had worked too hard to get to where I was, and I wasn't about to let them take it all away. The next morning, I sat down with Noah. I didn't confront him with accusations or anger. I didn't yell. I just asked him calmly if he had any idea what had happened. He looked at me, confused, as though nothing was wrong. I told him I knew everything, the conversation I overheard, the manipulation, the lies. I told him I was done. I told him I couldn't keep living like this. I told him that he had used me, and I wasn't going to let him do it anymore. At first, he tried to deny it. He tried to convince me that I was overreacting, that everything would be fine. But it didn't matter anymore. I had made up my mind. I was done. The next few weeks were a blur of emotions. There were moments of anger, of heartbreak, and of disbelief. But there were also moments of clarity, of empowerment. I began to realize that I had the strength to take back control of my life. I didn't need Noah. I didn't need his family. I didn't need anyone who didn't respect me or appreciate what I had given. I started to rebuild. I took control of my finances, moved my money into my own accounts, and made sure that I was no longer supporting a family that had never cared for me the way they should have. I filed for divorce, but it wasn't just about ending a marriage. It was about ending the cycle of manipulation and control that had defined my life for so long. I wasn't going to let this define me anymore. I wasn't going to let someone else's choices dictate my happiness. As the days passed, I felt a shift inside me. The pain of being used slowly faded, replaced by a sense of empowerment I had never felt before. I had taken control of my finances, of my future, and of my life. I was no longer just a passive participant in my own story, I was the one holding the pen. I began to focus on myself again. I returned to my career with renewed energy, started working on investments, and began planning for a future that didn't involve the baggage of a toxic relationship. The emotional journey I had been on had been painful, but it had also been transformative. I had learned to trust myself again, to value myself again, and to never settle for less than I deserved. I had come a long way from the woman who had blindly trusted Noah and his family. I was no longer the person who would sacrifice everything for someone else's happiness. I was now someone who put herself first, who knew her worth and wasn't afraid to walk away from anything or anyone who didn't see that. In the end, the emotional roller coaster I had experienced wasn't just about the pain of betrayal. It was about finding the strength to let go, to move forward, and to take control of my own destiny. And that was the most empowering thing of all. The moment I finally decided to let go of the life I thought I had with Noah wasn't dramatic. It wasn't filled with yelling or grand confrontations. No, the moment came in quiet clarity, in the kind of stillness that allows a person to realize they are no longer tethered to something that has been weighing them down for far too long. It came in the cold realization that my love for Noah, my loyalty to his family, had been misplaced all along. The day I overheard Noah and his parents laughing about how they planned to cut me loose once the debts were paid off, something inside me snapped. It wasn't just betrayal, it was the realization that the foundation of everything I had built my life on had been a lie. The weight of it hit me in waves, but rather than crumbling under the pressure, I began to see the truth with terrifying clarity. I had been used. I wasn't part of their family, I was just a tool, a means to an end. And I had allowed it to happen. The first step in the resolution was simple but terrifying. I made the decision to take control. I had spent so many years working for other people, building up my career, supporting my family, and supporting Noah. But in that moment, I realized that I had been neglecting the most important thing, myself. I had been so busy trying to be a good wife, a good daughter-in-law, a good person that I lost sight of my own worth. I had been giving everything to people who never saw me as an equal partner, who never treated me with the respect I deserved. I don't know exactly when the decision to file for divorce came, but it was like a door opening in my mind. It wasn't just about ending a marriage, it was about ending the control, the manipulation, and the emotional abuse that I had allowed to take root. It was about standing up for myself and saying that I would no longer allow anyone to take advantage of me, not even the people I loved. The first thing I did was contact a lawyer. The decision was terrifying, especially after everything I had put into this marriage. I had never expected things to go this far. I had invested so much, emotionally, financially, and physically. But I knew that the longer I stayed in this toxic relationship, the more I would lose. So I took a deep breath, called a lawyer, and started the process. I remember the first meeting with my lawyer, Claudia. She was a sharp, composed woman in her 50s who had seen it all. She didn't offer me any false promises or sugarcoat the situation. She just laid out the facts. Divorce was going to be messy. But I was ready. I had no choice. I had to make sure that the house, our house, the one I had poured so much money and time into, was legally mine. I couldn't let Noah and his family walk away from this situation with everything while I was left with nothing. I had sacrificed too much to let that happen. Claudia was incredible, methodical, and relentless in making sure I had everything I needed. We went over everything, my financial contributions, the money I had spent on the house, the payments I had made for Noah's family's debts. Every dollar was accounted for, and every legal document was in place. We even made sure that I had all the receipts, bank statements, and proof of the transfers I had made. In the meantime, Noah continued to play the part of the clueless, loving husband. He'd text me sweet messages, asking how my day went, pretending that everything was normal. And for a while, I played along. I didn't confront him about what I knew. I didn't raise my voice or accuse him of anything. I just let him think that I was still the same woman who had blindly trusted him. But every time he texted me with those kind words, I knew exactly what I was doing. I was playing my part in a larger plan, a plan that had nothing to do with him anymore. I was preparing for the moment when the truth would come out. And when it did, I wouldn't have to scream or fight. The truth would speak for itself. Once everything was ready, the next step was to file for divorce. It was a formality at that point, but the finality of it felt like a weight lifting off my chest. I walked into that courtroom with my head held high, knowing that I was no longer the person I had been when I entered the marriage. I wasn't the same woman who had been eager to please, eager to sacrifice for someone else's happiness. I was someone stronger now, someone who had learned the hard way that true power came from within. Noah was blindsided. He had no idea what was coming. When he got the papers, he called me, frantic. His voice cracked with confusion, but I was calm. Too calm. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I simply said, "We're done." And I hung up. That was the last time I heard from him. But the hardest part wasn't filing for divorce. It wasn't confronting Noah or even dealing with the fallout from his family. The hardest part was realizing that I had to walk away from the life I had built with him. That house, the house we had renovated together, was mine now. I had worked so hard to make it our home, but in the end, I realized it was never ours. It was mine. It was hard to walk away from something that I had invested so much in, but I knew I had to. I didn't need the house. I didn't need the memories. What I needed was my freedom. My independence. And most importantly, my self-respect. So I took control. The house, which had been the symbol of everything I had worked for in that marriage, became the symbol of my new life. I transferred the house into my name. I made sure that Noah's name was removed from the title. That house, once a source of emotional and financial strain, was now mine, free and clear. Once that was done, I could finally breathe. I knew that it wasn't over. There would be legal battles ahead, and Noah would likely fight to get some of what he thought he was entitled to. But I wasn't scared anymore. I had learned how to fight for myself. I had learned how to stand up for my worth. I moved out of the house. I didn't take any of the things that I had originally considered ours. Instead, I started fresh. I found a new place to live, a small apartment in the heart of the city that overlooked the skyline. It was nothing fancy, but it was mine. And that was all that mattered. I took a long, hard look at everything I had lost. But instead of feeling sorry for myself, I felt empowered. I was no longer the woman who had clung to a broken relationship, trying to make it work at the expense of my own happiness. I was no longer the woman who had been manipulated and used. I was a woman who had taken back control of her life, of her future. The road to independence wasn't easy. There were moments of doubt. There were nights when I cried myself to sleep, wondering if I had made the right decision. But those moments were fleeting. Because with each passing day, I felt stronger. I realized that I didn't need Noah. I didn't need his family. I had myself, and that was more than enough. The next chapter of my life wasn't defined by the house, the divorce, or the money I had spent. It was defined by my freedom. It was defined by the choices I made for myself and my future. I didn't let the past dictate who I would become. I didn't let the betrayal or the heartbreak define me. I took control of my life, and I walked away with a new sense of purpose, independence, and strength. The journey to reclaiming my life wasn't an easy one. I had spent years working tirelessly, giving my time, my resources, and my love to someone who, in the end, took it all for granted. But when everything fell apart, when the veil was lifted, and the truth was revealed, I knew it was time to stop playing the victim. It was time to take back what was mine, not just the house or the money, but my dignity, my peace of mind, and my future. After everything that had happened, after everything I had learned about Noah and his family, the most important thing to me wasn't just the money, it was the principle of it all. I had been used. I had been manipulated. And they thought they could get away with it. But I wasn't about to let them. I wasn't about to let them walk away with everything, thinking that they could keep taking from me without facing any consequences. I spent countless hours working with my attorney, Claudia, to ensure that Noah and his family would not only pay for their actions, but that they would understand the cost of their betrayal. I had spent so much of my life helping them, paying their bills, supporting their dreams, all while they used me as their personal ATM, all while they plotted behind my back, talking about how they'd cut me loose once the debts were paid off. But they underestimated me. They underestimated my ability to rise above the betrayal, to stand up for myself, and to fight back when they thought they had already won. I wasn't just going to walk away from this unscathed. I wasn't going to let them leave me with nothing while they walked away unpunished. I wanted them to know that what they did was wrong. And that there was a cost for everything. You can't treat people like they're disposable and expect there to be no fallout. The legal battle was long and drawn out. I had to fight tooth and nail for everything. But with each passing day, I grew stronger. With each meeting with my lawyer, each document signed, each piece of evidence I gathered, I began to feel the weight of what I had gone through finally shift in my favor. I was no longer just the woman who had been taken advantage of. I was no longer the woman who had been deceived. I was the woman who was taking back control, who was demanding justice. And I was going to get it. The first blow came when I managed to get the house fully transferred into my name. That house, our house, the one I had poured so much of myself into, was now mine. Completely and utterly mine. Noah had never expected this. He thought I would simply walk away, that I would take my losses and leave them all behind. But that wasn't who I was anymore. I had spent too long letting people walk all over me. It was time to turn the tables. And I did. Once the house was legally mine, I filed for divorce. That wasn't just the end of our marriage, it was the end of the control Noah and his family had held over me. It was a symbolic act, but it was also practical. I needed to make sure that Noah didn't have any claim to the property or to the debts we had accumulated together. And when I signed those divorce papers, it felt like I was signing my freedom. For once, I was no longer trapped in a relationship where I was expected to be the one to carry the weight of everything. For once, I was free. But I wasn't done. The house was mine, yes, but I knew that I needed more than just the property to feel like I had finally gotten justice. I needed Noah and his family to understand that their actions had consequences, that they couldn't keep taking from people without paying the price. I needed to make sure that they knew that they could not get away with using me for their own gain. That's when I turned my attention to the money. All the debt they had accumulated, debts I had paid off with my own money, had to be repaid. And I wasn't going to let them walk away from it without paying me back. But I wasn't just going to ask for it back. I wasn't going to be passive anymore. I wasn't going to let them sweep it under the rug and forget about everything they had done. I was going to make them pay. I filed a civil suit against Noah and his family, demanding repayment for every dollar I had spent to fix their mistakes. I wasn't going to let them get away with it. Every penny I had spent on renovations, every loan I had taken out to cover their debts, every payment I had made without question, it was all going to be accounted for. And I wasn't just doing this for the money. I was doing it for the principle. I was doing it to show them that I would not let them get away with treating me like I was disposable. Noah was furious when he received the lawsuit. He couldn't believe that I was doing this to him. He thought I would just let it go, that I would be the same woman who would quietly accept whatever was handed to me. But he didn't know who I had become. He didn't know the woman I had grown into. And as he stood there, trying to convince me to drop the lawsuit, I realized something: this wasn't about him anymore. It was about me. It was about taking back my life, my dignity, and my peace of mind. And I wasn't going to let anyone, especially not Noah, take that from me. I made sure that everything was legally binding, that every document was in order, and that Noah and his family had no choice but to face the consequences of their actions. It wasn't just about making them pay, it was about teaching them a lesson they would never forget. I wanted them to understand that I was no longer the person they could walk all over. I was no longer the naive woman who would sacrifice everything for them. I was someone who knew her worth and wasn't afraid to demand it. As the days passed, I started to see the pressure mounting on Noah and his family. The weight of the lawsuit, the legal fees, the pressure to pay me back, it was all starting to sink in. They were no longer the ones holding all the cards. I was. And that felt like the sweetest victory of all. The final blow came when I received a letter from Noah's lawyer. They were willing to settle. They were willing to pay me back in full for the debts I had covered. They had no choice. They had pushed me to the edge, and now they were going to pay for it. The amount I had spent, the pain I had endured, the betrayal I had suffered, it was all going to be repaid. And it was going to be repaid on my terms, not theirs. In the end, I didn't just walk away with a house or money. I walked away with something far more valuable: my sense of justice. I had fought for what was mine, and I had won. Noah and his family had been forced to face the consequences of their actions, and I had reclaimed everything they had tried to take from me. I had done it not out of revenge, but out of the need to show them, and myself, that I would never let anyone take advantage of me again. And as I signed the final settlement papers, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I was no longer the woman who had been manipulated, the woman who had been used. I was a woman who had taken back control of her life. I had reclaimed my independence, my dignity, and my future. And that was justice. I had learned that sometimes, the best way to get closure is not to wait for the people who hurt you to apologize. Sometimes, closure comes when you take the power back for yourself. When you stand up, walk away, and never look back. And that was the moment I realized, I didn't need Noah or his family to define me. I had defined myself. And that was worth more than anything they could ever take from me.
That's it for today's story on Life Reflections. I'd love to hear your take. Drop a comment below with your thoughts or a story of your own. If you enjoyed this, give a like and subscribe to keep the reflections coming. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.